Welcome back. Rising rates have been hard for all age groups, but for one group in particular, the difference between the haves and have-nots is stark. Here's a look at rates and older Canadians by the numbers. Many Canadians are feeling the pain of higher debt costs. 1 in 3 say they're seeing a falling standard of living, according to the Heaps 2023 survey of financial well-being. But for those in pre-retirement, age 55 to 64, that number jumps to 38%. And if inflation continues to rise, more than half of them say they would have to push back their retirement date. There's not a big cushion for most. 32% of working Canadians haven't set anything aside for retirement, including 1 in 5 pre-retirement aged workers. Those older Canadians are worried about their retirement. 64% think they may not have enough money to retire. 44% of them have less than $5,000 in savings. The 66% of pre-retirement adults who do own a home are slightly better off, but 34% of them plan to sell that home to fund their retirement. And more than half of those are concerned that higher rates will hurt the ability to sell their home when they need to. 27% of them are worried about paying off the rest of their mortgage so they can retire as planned. While interest rate increases have been painful, of course, for many, and inflation has made life less affordable for all, seniors have less time to recover, and they may be at risk of being permanently set back. Laura Tamblyn-Watts is CEO of CanAge, which is dedicated to seniors advocacy. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
So seniors are an interesting group because on the one hand, Laura, they're savers. And so after many, many years of earning nothing on their savings, some of them, those that have savings, will actually benefit from higher interest rates. They'll begin to earn a little return again. It sounds as though that's not the majority. To my ears, it sounds as though most seniors are getting higher costs. And of course, they've got less runway to make up for that. How concerning has this period been?
It's critical, and it's only going to get worse as we're seeing the consumer price index rise. And the reality is what we count in that consumer price index, and indeed how we count poverty for seniors, doesn't include a basket of goods that seniors actually need. It's missing things like care and care provision. It's also missing medications. So there's a lot of hidden concern. And then we're seeing a lot of older adults, of course, being caught. They may have a house, but they've got mortgages. And we're seeing more and more people lose their homes because they can't maintain their mortgage. And that was going to be their way that they were going to retire. So things are getting very difficult.
And of course, when you say those words, there was a time, Laura, when somebody had to sell their home, they could go rent something. They could go find a place to live. That's not exactly the case right now. It's hard to find affordable rentals in many, many parts of this country. So are we likely to see more housing vulnerability for seniors as we look down the road?
We have never seen so many people at risk or in homelessness as we have now, particularly people who we would have thought would have been fairly financially secure, quite middle-class people who maybe still had a mortgage, but they were in a home. Now, if they have to sell that home, their chances of finding a rental replacement is very low. In fact, usually much more than they can afford. And they can often not stay in their own communities. And that's critically important for social inclusion, but also just things like getting to the doctor and getting around. So if they may need to move into a rural community, and that means social isolation and transportation woes as well.
So we do hear in the data here that some seniors will push back their retirement. How much of an option is that to keep working? I mean, all of us who know people who are 65 can tell you it's pretty young, pretty able-bodied and of sound mind. So should we just think about retiring later, although that's obviously easier in some professions than others?
We're seeing an interesting connection that is something we've never really seen before, which is a massive labor crunch, but still an ageist desire to get older people out of the workforce. So that doesn't really make any sense. The reality of the circumstance is, while companies should be keeping workers longer and multi-generational teams are both more effective, more stable, and make more money for a company, it's really hard to get a job if you're an older person, particularly if you've left the workforce and you're trying to come back. Now, for some very privileged folks, sort of older men who are in executive urban type of experiences, the chance of coming back is higher. But if you're a woman or from a racialized community, it becomes not a real option for most.
Just a few seconds here, but of course there are supports for seniors, including CPP some may have paid into, certainly OAS. Is that enough to keep seniors going if they don't have savings of their own?
No, it's almost impossible to live on. It was never set up to be enough to live on. And now with the costs rising, it really is going to mean poverty for most older people who are trying to live off of that.
Laura, so good to have you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Laura Tamblyn-Watts is CEO of CanAge, which is an advocacy dedicated to seniors. A lot of people aren't just hoping rates don't rise further. Some are now counting on rates to fall in the spring. Could that be a mistake? Cailey Heaps is president and CEO of Heaps, Estrin. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So as somebody with a close eye on the real estate market like you, I'm curious, do you worry that people are actually looking ahead to that spring and thinking there's some big windfall ahead? In other words, rates are coming down and the market improves markedly.
It's a very good question. So I think that there are a lot of people in the market who are anticipating rates to fall and call it April or May and then a rebound to the market. But I think that there's different strategies that buyers can take in today's market that, that we're exploring with clients as well.
And what would some of those strategies be? I mean, rates are still high. And of course, let's also put this in the context of renewals that are coming and the effect that might have on the overall housing market. What are you telling people about managing this period?
Yeah, so I think there's two perspectives. So for buyers who are getting into the marketplace, although rates are higher now, I think it's really important to remember that that's being offset by a reduction in purchase price. So if you look at affordability, it's actually in many times or many instances more affordable to buy now, even with the higher rates. And then you can renegotiate your rates in a year or so. So we've been looking at cost to carry with clients, and most of the time in that first time buyer market, this is actually a good time to buy despite the highest interest rates or higher interest rates. And then looking at it from the other perspectives, I mean, you had from the seller's perspective, I think that there are segments of the market that are still performing well. And, it's very, each market sort of operates as its own micro market. So it's difficult to give broad advice. Yeah. But there are certainly stars in the industry still.
There is. I mean, we've just been talking about the fact that there are people out there who need value in their homes. It's part of a retirement plan, especially for older Canadians. We keep hearing it's different now because of the supply-demand picture. Are you in the camp that would say home values will stay pretty solid? They might get a little more affordable, they might get a little less, but in the near, next few years, say, we're not going to see a drop off the cliff the way we might have decades ago?
I would agree with that, Amanda. I don't think we're going to see drastic changes in pricing. Certainly, I don't think we're going to see drastic downward pressure on pricing. I think the fundamentals that drive the Toronto market still exist, such as immigration, low supply. So I don't think we'll see major drops. I think what's perhaps slightly different in real estate that I've seen in my career is we always used to say location, location, location. And now really the focus is timing, timing, timing.
One of the other factors, of course, is, obviously the mortgage rate, the cost of carrying that is a big deal. Inflation also changed the affordability picture for a lot of people. They just didn't have the same disposable income. Now that we see inflation backing off, what do you think that does to the kind of mindset around what people can afford?
Well, I think this will be a very interesting holiday season to see what spending is like. I think it's important to remember that people who qualified for mortgages in the last few years did so with a stress test. So although it's uncomfortable to pay the current interest rates, they were qualified based on higher rates. So, I think it's important for people to try and stay in their houses, and that's different advice than lots of people would give. But banks are being mandated to assist mortgage holders, and if they can hang on, based on the pre-approvals at those former stress rates, things will ease up. Things will ease up within, I would say, certainly within the second or third quarter of 2024.
So good to have you for this, Cailey. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cailey Heaps is president and CEO of Heaps, Estrin. Coming up, Canada's healthcare system is failing its users. A new report quantifies exactly how much. That's still ahead. But first, we're all for the new law in Ontario banning puppy mills, the Preventing Unethical Puppy Sales Act. Oh, that's PUPS for short, which amends the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act, or the PAWS Act. Who knew regulators were so punny? We aren't exactly sure, though, how it will be enforced. Cracking down on letting a female dog breed more than once a year sounds good on paper, but does the law really belong in the kennels of the nation? We're thinking this pup is all bark and no bite. We're back after this.